Hello, hi Johnson. Very nice to see you today.
Holly, how are you? Thanks so much for having
Oh,
me.
oh no, that's a fly. Oh, sorry. Today we have yes, Johnson Chong here, and he is a spiritual guide, author of Sage Sapien from Karma to Dharma. He's also the creator of Exodus Retreats, and he works with conscious leaders to help them break through their mental and emotional blocks that keep them in suffering and help them find peace and fulfillment. So thank you, Johnson, for joining me today.
Thank you, Bali. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
Thank you. So today, today's episode is about what is ego identity and how does it help and hinder us in our personal and professional life. So I guess I wanted to find out a little bit more about, what does ego mean to you? What do you think it means? And yeah, I'll go from there.
Sure. I mean, we have, the clinical definitions of ego, but, to kind of zoom out and just simplify it, I see ego as not necessarily good or bad. It just
Yeah,
is. And with ego creates stories to protect us. So we can look at it as a protective barrier. It's that part of ourself that is trying to keep us alive, essentially. And oftentimes that's a limiting story that tells us that we're not able to do something. It
yeah,
limits us by making us feel safe in the familiar. So, for example, a very uh, common ego story I see among my clients in conscious leadership is I feel like a fraud. I'm not good enough. And if we have that program on repeat, even though they are good enough and that they're leading a community of people who see them as a role model,
yeah,
but if that program keeps playing and eating at them, it keeps them limited in what it is that they can do and how they can show up even more powerfully and authentically so that they can grow their organizations or their businesses, whatever kind of leader that they are, right? An entrepreneur, someone working in an organization. So this is they come in the form of stories that we tell ourselves. So that's one way that I look at ego, and I like to simplify it in that way. Now, it's not always that ego is something to shy away from, because the benefit of the ego is that
yeah,
it does keep us safe and in the familiar.
yeah,
The hindrance of that is that it also keeps us safe and in the familiar. So it's a
yeah,
double-edged sword there, right? So it's more about not demonizing or pushing or suppressing the ego. It's
yeah,
more about making it our ally, so that we know when we can work with ego, um, and find the uses for it, and when it's not useful. So it's a matter of discernment and making the right choices.
yeah. Okay, thank you for sharing that about what ego means. When you say ego is a form of protection, and could you, and there is a benefit to it, could you share a little bit more about what do you think? Because personally, I have this perspective that ego is, oh, this is something that I don't want. So, and I think that many people may feel like that as well, and they may relate to that. Oh, this is maybe something I don't want to. What do you think are the benefits of it, and how can we be okay with it coming into our lives or being in our lives?
Sure. We all have preferences, right? Some of us like chocolate, some of us don't like chocolate. We like
Yeah,
vanilla, right? So it's
yeah,
something as simple as that. And then some of us, are not afraid of heights. And it's really simple for us to just jump off a cliff and trust that the universe has us. And some of us struggle, right?
yeah,
We all have our preferences, and we're biologically wired in a way to keep us from dying. That is the base fear that everyone has, is that we will die in some way, perish, be annihilated, and we will not be remembered on the face of this earth.
yeah,
And everything that we do as human beings on some level is on leaving some sort of legacy to feel important in some way. And the ego is trying to do that. It's trying to make its stamp in history, right?
yeah,
And so However, it's our journey through life to realize that that amount of controlling gets in the way sometimes of our own greatness. And at times it does protect us. It keeps us from doing stupid things like falling
Yeah.
down the stairs or
Yeah.
right, or drinking too much and then deciding to go paragliding or whatever it is, right? So
Yeah.
ego in that way, to keep in the familiar, is good in that way.
Yeah.
However, when we're trying to, I've been in talks with some people about creating something really big, a big project. If I allowed my ego to keep me in the ways of how I perceive um, good collaboration is, or how I see like we should work together as a team. If I have a fixed idea of how things are going to play out in this project that I'm going to engage in,
Yeah.
that will limit, because there will be no flexibility to play with this team, to co-create, to participate, to
Yeah.
brainstorm together. It will
Yeah.
be one-sided, right? So that's something that I will have to check, because I have very strong ideas, but I also have to be open to others. So then
Yeah.
it's about a two-way street where
Yeah.
communication happens. So that's how it plays out in that way, right? So and also, if you think about ego in like an acronym,
Yeah.
EGO, engaging in God opposition. So you can use the word God or source or energy. It doesn't matter what your belief system is, but
Yeah.
that energy which created all of life and us, our thoughts, our consciousness, that when we're opposing it, the flow of things,
Yeah.
that's ego. There's a
Yeah.
time and place for it, right?
Yeah.
There are times when we have to oppose it, right, so that we are physically safe. And then there are times when it doesn't help us. So I
Yeah.
like to think of it in more simplistic terms like that, so that it's not conceptual, but that you can see how it practically plays out in your life.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying is that it helps us. There are areas in life where it's going to protect us and it's going to, um, I guess, help us survive and yeah, prevent us from maybe falling down the same path that we may have often chosen, which may not be a healthy path. But then on the other side, that it can prevent us from living in the flow of life. Like you said, when you when you were working in collaboration with others, you had to sort of go, okay, I have to allow others to, it can't be just, it's not just me. It's also a unity of other people and to go into that flow of things. Okay, that's very interesting. If what would you say if somebody feels that they have uh, they sense that they do have ego? Let's say they feel like they do have, they say, Johnson, look, I'm experiencing this really strong resistance and I feel ego coming up into me, and I feel like sometimes I may maybe say things which are not good, or and I feel this, then later I go, oh my gosh, I regret. What would you say to the person to help them with their to help them with this?
Sure. Okay. So what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, is that someone's feeling resistant in a certain circumstance, right? That could
Yeah.
be a group project. It could be, let's say, a changing of a social role or position in their life.
Yeah.
An example that comes to mind that I see very often is the mother, someone playing the role of the mother,
Yeah.
right? And the kids leave the nest, and now they're no longer needed in the way that they once were when they
Yeah.
were a mother.
Yeah.
And oftentimes women, if they're not able to let go of the role of mother,
Yeah.
right, they get stuck in this ego opposition that we were talking about. There's a sense of resisting because they're grasping and holding on to something they once were, because now the children are adults, they've grown up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if we don't, and this actually is something I've experienced with my own mother,
Yeah.
who my mother likes to baby all of
Yeah.
us, my brother and my sister,
Yeah.
and once, so we're safe, right? So actually my mother is like the embodiment of almost of ego, right?
Yeah.
Of wanting to control and to make my life a very certain way, the way that she perceives it, and it's
Yeah.
very narrow, right?
Yeah.
And it's within her, it's within her perception of how my life should be, which
Yes.
isn't exactly how I want my life to be, right? I don't
Yes.
get that choice if I
Yes. Yes.
let my mother to do that.
Yeah.
So this is, if someone is resisting the transition into uh, an openness that we cannot predict, like what scares my mother the most probably is that she can't control it, right? She
Yeah.
can't see the possible outcome because she's
Yeah.
very attached to the outcome. um, it, what those people need to do is first ask why, right? Why am I so resistant to it? Why am I so uncomfortable with the
Yeah.
unknown? What is it that I'm really afraid of? These are really important questions to ask, and if they're not asked, or even if you don't want to ask them, then
Yeah.
there's no way that you can even begin to address it, because some people honestly are, that's how they want to exist.
Yeah.
But if you want to have a different experience of life,
Yeah.
one that is more in flow with life instead of freaking out about every little thing that happens,
Yeah.
that you can control, then you need to ask difficult questions. And once you ask those questions, you need to then explore it, in a visceral, energetic way. And oftentimes you do this, in workshops, in
Yeah.
groups with people,
Yeah.
so that you can begin to let the ego die in a way,
Yeah.
uh, until the ego can be reborn and it becomes something different. It becomes an ally that you work with, who
Yeah.
comes in and, checks you out a little bit, and makes sure that you're in check and you're not just throwing yourself out there without any sort of boundaries, because that's the opposite
Yeah.
of like being too open, no structure.
Yeah.
So that is where most people are at, is having to, they need to experience that, the death of the ego, and
Yeah.
then have a new rebirth with the ego. So ego goes from that dictator that's sitting at the throne to the friend or the council member who
Yeah.
is in your, he's your ally, she's your ally,
Yes.
versus the boss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lovely. I mean, as you're talking, I have some things that just pop up as you mentioned. That one is when you talk about parenting, and that's uh, it. As a parent, I am a parent as well, and I know that the ego does come in, because you do want certain things and you do want certain, and it's very, and that's when we talk about conscious parenting, right? Conscious, being a parent who is aware to allow your child to be who they are, to nurture them to be who they are, and then to let them go. So I have this perspective that children are not ours. They're not ours, they're not mine. They are, I brought them here to nurture and to bring them up the best way that I can, to nurture him with all the skills and everything that I can possibly do, but also to let him go, to let him go at the end of so to not say this is mine. And I think that's when the ego is when you identify also with something as being mine so strongly, isn't it?
Yes, that's identification is a strong part of
Yeah.
ego. It's this it's this assumption that that's all you are. Like,
Yeah.
I'm only a mother and I can only take care of my children by doing their laundry, by cooking and cleaning for them, by doing things a certain way,
Yeah.
right? And then when that role changes, and when the kids are
Yeah.
off to university, they're living afar, maybe they're abroad somewhere, you no longer need to coddle them or nurture them that way. So what else are you to do? You've been mother for 18 years, and you don't have something else that excites you, that ignites your
Absolutely.
passion. So,
Yeah.
so that's part of it. It's also a question of purpose. What is
Yeah.
your purpose in life? Whether that is something that's very social, environmental. Is it something that's more around the personal? That your personal identity really is just on uh, helping the relationships within the family unit. So we all have different destinies.
Yeah.
However, most people are not clear on what that is. And so
Yeah.
they get attached to certain archetypes and roles and
Yeah.
ways of being. And that confusion there is really what we need to work on, is that breaking free of ego. Yeah.
Yeah. And I relate to that when you say about identity, because a long time ago when I graduated, and I think I was working for some time, and then it was in a very good environment, and then I left that role to to look for a new role. But I could feel how much I identified with a job, like with, so even for myself, like the word psychologist, sometimes I don't like to use it because I feel almost like it's an identity. Like I'm not any of that. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not, but I am in a way. Do you get what I'm saying? It's like all of these are labels. So again, it's like, how do we I mean, maybe I might be aware, but what if somebody is not aware of this? How can they start to develop an awareness and, I guess, be okay with their sense of self and be okay with who they are without having like, okay, I'm a mother, this is my role, or I'm a CEO, so I'm great. So how can one start to disidentify from your perspective? What do you and sort of be like, okay, this is me. I don't have to identify with labels. I don't have to identify with roles. Yeah, maybe you can share what you think
Sure.
about
Yeah,
this, or
that's a lot of the work that I do with people. Of
yeah,
course, there's essentially two types of people.
yeah,
One type of person would be that their self-esteem is so damaged and they've been abused, whether it's mentally, verbally, sexually,
yeah.
to the point where they need to identify with something that is safe and familiar. Right. So
Okay.
in that way,
Yeah,
ego is actually quite important.
yeah,
So if you came to me when I was 11, 12, 15 years old, when my parents were mentally, physically, verbally abusive to me,
yeah,
it probably wouldn't have worked, right? Because I needed an anchor point, right? And now, as I've got, I'm 35 now,
yeah,
right? I've been through enough of life to have been able to process the the struggle that I went through as a child with parents who were a bit violent, just because of their upbringing. And I actually now am in a place where I honor that and I accept that and I respect that. And actually, I love that part about me that's quite wounded, because
yeah,
that's made me into who I am today. I don't
yeah,
hate them. I don't resent them. They were
yeah,
doing the best that they know how.
yeah,
So that's one type of person in that stage of evolution. And now, as I was going down the yogic path, exploring and learning how to teach meditation and energy work, shamanic wisdom, and all of the ancient esoteric practices,
yeah,
what I started to realize was, if I keep identifying with the fact that I'm a wounded child who had abusive parents,
yeah,
that will be my identity. And is that what I want? If I keep identifying with, oh, I went to school for theater, right? So I'm only an actor, or I'm
yeah,
only a yoga teacher, I'm only a meditation teacher,
yeah,
I'm a Reiki master, so, there are all these labels. And it's important to label, to distinguish, what is what. We call this thing a table, and that's a wall,
yeah,
and this is
yeah.
a door. So it's important to label things
For
in the
practicality,
of
right?
practicality.
Yeah,
But the trap is that we get stuck, that
yeah,
it's like, oh, the window and the wall and the
yeah,
door, those are the only things that are real. And then we don't
yeah,
see the invisible spaces
yeah,
around, the energy that is moving around the
yeah,
space. And then we start feeling like life is repetitive and really boring, and then we get depressed. And so it's it's in finding the truth in both
yeah,
realities, right? So
yeah,
um, yes, it was very important for me at one point to label, like, yes, I'm strong, I'm courageous, right? You use affirmations.
yes,
I'm open, and I am enough, right?
yes, yeah,
It doesn't matter for me. I don't care if I'm strong or courageous or open. I don't need
yeah,
those
yeah,
affirmations to ground me into who I am, because I know who I am so much that I don't care who I am.
yeah,
It doesn't matter, right? But at one point, when I was, quite wounded, I needed to feel like I belonged, and I felt like I was part
yeah,
of something,
yeah,
right? And so, people who are in, let's say, further down the line of their evolution, not that it's wrong or right. I mean, it
yeah.
doesn't even matter
It's
in
not a
terms
good
of
or
age.
bad. Yeah,
Some people can be experiencing this, very early on. yeah, and it's also on everyone's own timeline. And then you
Absolutely.
get to a certain point when you realize where, okay, I don't want to identify so much as boss anymore, or as the CEO, or
Yeah.
as the millionaire entrepreneur who does X, Y, and Z. There's another side of life I want to explore. And oftentimes you see with these people, they start to shift their identification with identity by moving into philanthropic work. I'm going to go do
Yeah.
nonprofit stuff for orphanages, or I'm going to do something to pick up all the plastic in the world's oceans, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Or they might start exploring their inner artist. Oh, I've always wanted to, right? Our lives are not meant to be, ooh, I'm going to do this from age 20 till I retire, then I die. It's not that compartmentalized way of living that we were brought up to think, with how society is basically trying to make little uh,
Yeah.
robots, right? So
Yeah.
that it feeds the economic engine of the world.
Yeah.
They're meant
Yeah.
to play so
Oh, I
many
love
different.
that. I love that you said that. I love that. I mean, that's exactly it. It's like creating robots to feed the, what did you say? The economic
The
engine of
economic
the,
engine.
I don't know.
That's
This is so true, because this is something I always question is how, corporations are always striving for profit, and that's fine and everything. But I also have a perspective about growth. Like, there has to be a time when sometimes it's okay. It's okay not to continuously have to go like, we have to like grow in the sense of profits, right? But
yeah.
maybe this is controversial. So the other leaders
No,
might
I
go,
don't think it
what?
is controversial.
So
I mean, it can be controversial if someone is attached to the identity of what success looks like. So if a company is thinking like, oh, it's only ROI and it's
yeah,
it's more about the profit than the people,
yeah,
it's not sustainable. And what
yeah,
is not sustainable is not real. So why would I want to work for a company that sees things in that light? So if
yeah,
you look at the cycles of nature, we have 4 seasons. I mean, except for in Singapore, you have
yeah.
one season.
That
But in
is true.
most places around the world,
Yeah,
you have summer and fall and spring and winter. And so
yeah,
if you're experiencing, like right now, I'm in Australia, so we're experiencing winter.
yeah,
I'm not going to run around trying to, you know, create new projects because it's cold. Like it's hibernation mode. It's time
yeah,
to rest, to restore, to replenish, and to
yeah,
maintain. Right? That
yeah.
is the energy of winter. So as a
Yes.
company, if you're entering a winter phase, do more team building work.
I love
Build
that.
more rapport
Yes.
with your people. It's
Yeah.
not a time just because you're not making, profit during that time. Maybe when
Yes.
spring and summer comes around, boom, there you
Yeah.
go. So use your winter months wisely. Don't try to make it into summer because it's not possible. It's
Yeah.
winter.
Yeah.
That's just how nature works.
Yeah.
So that's an attachment to our perception of what success looks like. So if
Yeah.
you think success is this like exponential climb of revenue,
Yeah.
it's not sustainable. You're going to crash. You're going to burn. You're going to be upset. You're going to get lots of depressed people, anxious people, and people who
Yeah.
resent you all.
And this
Uh,
is what is happening in the corporate world. I would say that a lot of corporations, maybe they're slowly starting to become more conscious, and we need more people like you to work on that. But I think a lot of times uh, it is still about climbing the ladder, which in a way, I think when we talk about ego, that also, it goes, yeah. So and then there's also the profit side of it. And,
And it's not
it's,
that profit is not important. It is
no,
important, but we
yeah,
have to, again, the balance of both.
yeah,
So, can we have a ladder that is linear where you can ascend a hierarchy, but yet at the same time know when to turn that straight line into a
yeah,
circle, right?
yeah,
So that we can have the existence of both. Can you make profit, but also at the same time think circularly, non-linearly,
yeah,
more emotionally, more compassionately to take care of the relationships in your
yes,
community, in your organization? And if you're not thinking left brain, right brain, and you're only going left brain,
yeah,
that's only one half of the pie. And those companies are going to struggle because they're not allowing what's already happening around the world right now. I mean, you look at what COVID's done. It's made us shift our relationship to
Yeah.
work-life balance. You know, someone was the other day like, oh yeah, I was just taking a call. I was sitting in a coffee shop, and
Yeah.
just taking it easy
Yeah.
because people realize, wait a minute, why am I working so hard? You know,
Yeah.
the world like put the brakes on. It's like, I don't need to work that hard,
Yeah.
do I? I'm
Yeah.
still getting the same amount of work done. And
Yeah.
now because of, you know, quarantine and now post quarantine, people slowly coming out, and people are still not going back to the offices. It's
Yeah.
like 10%, 15%
Yeah.
occupancy in offices, because people realize that they're having a lot more efficiency if they balance work with life
Yeah.
and spend more time living instead of just working. And at the end of the day, everyone wants that. No one wants to be sitting in the office for 16 hours just to be making money for what purpose?
Absolutely. I mean,
Right?
exactly it, because life is not just about work, and life is not just about your personal life. It is, that's why when we were talking about the title, we were talking whether we should say personal or professional. And it really is like, you cannot separate your personal and professional. And even when I teach about work stress, we talk about how there is a spillover effect. Whatever happens usually at home is going to have a spillover effect with your work, and there needs to be some understanding there. And then whatever happens with your work, then there is going to be a spillover effect in your home as well. So
Yeah, I
it's,
mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, if Jane, let's just say, if Jane is going through a divorce right now and she's got
yeah,
4 kids, right?
yeah,
That Jane is the same Jane who pops into work and is tired and is
yeah,
also emotionally stressed and is stressed out not just about her divorce and her kids and how she's supposed to survive and pay the legal fees, but
yeah,
she's also got deadlines. How do I keep my job? Right.
yeah,
And then now she's overworking at her job and then going back home with that stress of like, oh God, I didn't get that project completed, and what's going to
yeah,
happen? I might get fired. How am I then going to pay for the divorce and support the children and the family? Right. So it feeds each other, like the personal
yeah,
and the professional. And
yeah,
and if we are as a society not allowed to talk about our feelings at home or at work, then where else are we going to talk about our feelings? How else are we supposed to connect to people? Well, if we don't, then that
yeah,
eats us up. It creates chronic inflammation. Your organs are not happy. And then you start to develop cancers and heart disease, and you
yeah,
die from stress. And then it's like, well, what was the point of that life? You know, and that's not a pretty picture. So organizations, I think, are the progressive organizations are looking at integrating more holistic means of taking care of their people in all the other ways that they can, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, even. I
yeah,
mean, you have people bringing spirituality into the workplace.
yeah,
There's a lot of people hide that because they don't want to, you know,
yeah,
at the workplace, they feel it's not safe to reveal that.
yeah, yeah.
Actually, in fact, if everyone's very open about, you know, of course there's a certain level of
Not
how much you feel
religious,
about yourself,
respecting all
right?
religion, but
Exactly, right.
spirituality is different. So, yeah, because
I'm a big
sometimes people
proponent of,
mix
yeah,
up both spirituality and religion. So it's not, it's completely different. Spirituality and being religious.
yeah, there is a difference. I mean, and it's also, and whether it doesn't necessarily matter if you believe in something or not, it's more
Yes,
about it's the diversity in conversation. It's about
yes,
developing empathy with your coworker,
yes,
um, fellow human being. It's about learning a new perspective from someone else. You know, whether you agree with them or not, it's
yeah,
open conversation. And if you can do that, and everyone feels safe enough to do that, you have a thriving culture in your workplace.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that is a point which is so important, and it brings me to the point about vulnerability, because this is something that I think is a struggle, and it is related to the point about ego. Again, vulnerability, being okay with sharing, and being okay with sometimes being who you are. Sometimes it can feel like a block because they're not able to be vulnerable, and maybe they don't feel comfortable with sharing who they are. But unfortunately, that also creates a barrier. That also creates a barrier to
It does.
yeah. So
It does.
think the video stalled there for a second. Yeah. So I guess in terms of like ego and vulnerability, if someone is feeling quite, I guess, they feel like it's quite hard to be themselves because maybe they don't want to share and they feel quite vulnerable to share. What would you say? What would you tell them? What would you advise? Where can they start?
Vulnerability. Vulnerability is an interesting one. It's a word that we use quite often. And so, I mean, if we look at the root of vulnerability, it comes from the Latin vulnus, which means wound.
Yeah.
So you think about an open wound.
Yeah.
You don't just poke an open wound. You bandage it. You maybe put some lavender oil on it so it heals quicker. Bandage around it.
Yeah.
And when you're ready, maybe you can move that arm again, right? And all is better, right? And then when you take that bandage off, a little scar might appear as a reminder that, oh, right, you burned yourself. So being vulnerable doesn't mean just bare your heart out on the table and just emotional diarrhea out of your mouth. It's still a level of discernment, right? And there's also, just like the natural seasons, right? Everything happens in due time. There is a stage in which things happen. And so if, let's say, someone is feeling intimidated at work, there's some sort of interpersonal squabble happening between people. They have differences of opinions. And they're feeling very mentally and emotionally stressed about this particular relationship with a fellow coworker. And there's some tension there, right? That's conflict, right? You wouldn't necessarily, that's like the wound again. You wouldn't necessarily start poking at it. That's why you have HR and you have people helping to mediate. But the only way to get to the point where you can take that Band-Aid off and the thing is healed is that you have to work with the two parties individually. You have to deal with their belief systems and their perspectives from a very deep level. You have to address, you have to look at their relationship with ego, their relationship with identity, their relationship with success, the stories they tell themselves about who they think they are, how their authenticity. It's the level of authenticity they project out into their lives. Are they or are they not? Or is it somewhere in between? Are they honest? Are they integral people? All of these values have to be addressed. And then you have to then get them to realize that within themselves so that they can then have the opportunity to see that in each other. And when that connection's made, that's when relationships heal. Right? So then you can take the Band-Aid off. But oftentimes what you see happen is that people just throw on Band-Aids. Okay, just ignore this person, ignore that person, just move on with your life and let's call it quits. To heal the interpersonal dynamics that are in conflict often, you have to pause and do some deep work. Right? When we dislike someone, it means that they're reflecting a part of us that we really don't like about ourselves. And that's a shadow aspect of ourself seen through the other person. And if we just go, oh, we have two choices. We can go, I don't like that person. They just rub me the wrong way. I hate them. I'm going to avoid them. I'm going to be really mean to them. That's option one. Option two is you use that person, as a shadow teacher. The Buddhists talk about the shadow, the demon, feeding your inner demon. This is a Buddhist practice. And look, actually, if you think about a lot of the Buddhist deities, some of them are really wrathful looking. They look like big. You feed them. You don't go, right? You welcome them in. It's like what Rumi says about his poem in his poem about the guest house. You invite all of them in, the ghosts, the demons, your friends, your allies, everyone in with an open, compassionate heart. And if you can do that with this person you're having a conflict with, you will learn something about yourself. You may not agree with that person, but you have gained a new perspective. And now you're able to respect more people, who have different opinions than you have. And that is a win. So these are the two choices, basic choices that people have when they are coming into conflict with another human being.
Yeah.
And if you're choosing to run away from them,
Yeah.
and all you do with your day is gossip with other people about that person that bothers you,
Yeah.
right? That says something about you.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Right?
it's also, I think, it's also recognizing that we all have different consciousness levels, and also to allow people to be at their consciousness level and to evolve at their own stage, because maybe if they said something that was hurtful, or maybe if they did something at work that was hurtful or that was annoying, it's just because they are reacting from their level of consciousness. And I remember Eckhart Tolle was sharing a story about this, and so rather than come up with all these stories in your head, like this person is bad and this person is doing it to me, this person is hurting me and is out to get me, you step back and you just recognize the person as currently this is their conscious level, and this is how they're responding from their conscious level. It's not, they are doing their best that they can, and this is where they are at right now. And it's just to recognize, rather than, like you said, to go into gossiping and all of that, and to then talking about it, because then you create more stories, right? Like you create more things in your head. So yeah. Great.
I mean, it's all relationships that are in conflict or tension. It's exactly that. You have the choice to create more stories, like going back to the story of me and my mom when I was younger. Why was I born into this family? Why wasn't I born into another family? Why are my parents always trying to belittle me and make me fail? Why are they, why do they hit me? Why do they say really disparaging things to me to make me feel not smart enough, not good enough? And then, I would create a bunch of stories as to why they did that.
Yeah.
But in actuality, I didn't actually know, because I never actually asked them why, right?
Yes.
I just assumed, right? Yes, it was really painful. So, but I didn't ask. I didn't actually know. And when I, grew up and started asking the questions and realizing that, wait a minute, that was the best that they could have done at that time. That's all they knew. And stepping deep into the spiritual work, which is really, the spiritual work really is a practice of empathy. It's a practice of seeing the world from someone else's shoes. And I think being an actor and playing other characters was really helpful in that, because oftentimes I had to play really villainous people.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Right. I mean, you have to, the villain doesn't think they're a bad person. The villain is a villain. There's a certain series of events in their lives that led them to make the kinds of choices and actions that they decided to make. Like Hitler didn't think he was a bad person. Like he thought he was doing his country right. I mean, it's just that, of course, the events and the ways that we move through life start to affect the kinds of actions that we take, and we get really attached to a certain outcome. We'll do whatever it is to get to that end, right? So that's kind of what happened with a lot of the world dictators and tyrants. And so, but anyway, but even as someone who is not, that does not have like malevolent intent, you still have to practice empathy by stepping into, how do you empathize with Trump? How do you find your inner Trump within you? Because our reality, the projection of all of our conscious thoughts and all our subconscious, unconscious thoughts
because
as well.
There's two, right? We can choose. We are always choosing. We can either be, we have both. We have good, when you say good and the bad, I mean, I don't want to label it, but if you know what I mean, like the kind parts, and then we also have those parts which can do harm. But it's like a path, like you say, it's choosing empathy, and also the spiritual path isn't always easy. It isn't always like, okay, you have to deal with a lot of, you have to, even working with your ego and trying to understand what is it, and within yourself, it's a lot of work. It is a lot of,
it is. It's not the easiest path, because if we're trying to be a person, if if what you value in life is being a good person,
Yeah.
right, you're going to do things that society has programmed as good. This is what it means to be good.
Yeah.
If you decided to live your life as a criminal, I'm living outside the system because I've been dealt these cards in life, and I feel like this is my way of having some sort of revenge on the world, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to live my life through these means. Being spiritual, spirit is all encompassing. It is the energy that created all that is.
Yeah.
That's everything under the sun, the shadows, the dark mossy bits, the little cockroaches, all the monsters under your, like the earth, all, strange looking creatures, like and all the fluffy, furry animals, like everything that we love and everything we find grotesque, right?
Yeah.
So that's spirit. So if you're a spiritual person, it means you're going to be looking for any way to learn from all of it. That's a big ask,
Yes.
right? To be neutral in the face of all of it, right? It's not about trying to be good and trying to be bad. And that's an agenda. It's about accepting all that is. And that's not for, the faint of heart, because it can get pretty dark sometimes. And then it can get really euphoric.
Yeah.
So if you want to walk a spiritual path, it means that you have to be ready to embrace everything that you find. Because you're going to go into the jungle and the sun's going to rise, the sun's going to fall. You're going to have all types of things come at you. And you you have to be ready for whatever is going to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great segue to sort of, I guess, end the interview. I want to thank you for your time and thank you for sharing this perspective about ego. I know we've talked about a lot of things today, and I feel like we could talk so much more as well. There's so much about this topic and there's so much more to share. So first of all, thank you for your time. Is there anything else that you want to share before we end off this conversation today?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, if anyone's interested, in this kind of work, in really deep diving into self-discovery, breaking through a lot of the things that we were talking about, I do offer 8-week programs if anyone's interested. They run every 4 weeks, sometimes every 6 weeks, and you just calendar, and that's all on my website. I also do discovery calls for people that are interested for about 45 minutes, and it's a complimentary discovery call to see if it actually makes sense for you to engage in work. I typically work with people who are in some sort of leadership role. So that could be someone who works for an organization, or they could be an entrepreneur, because I love working with people that have a mission that is bigger than themselves. Not to say that I don't work with people who don't, but that's my preference, right? In making impact and leaving my mark in the world. So so if anyone's interested, it's just johnsonchong.com, and that's pretty much it.
Well, I'm personally definitely interested. So I saw your video about it a few days ago, and I thought, wow, I was sending this to my friends, and I thought this is really good. This is so needed, and even I myself, I need this as well. Thank you for doing the work you do. Thank you.
Thank you for doing the work that you do. And thank us for doing the work that we do.
Yay!